Isn't it true that the record shows that? Can't you acknowledge that? That you're going to wound her again, just in the same way you've heard all these witnesses testify the many ways she has been wounded? Even though your intentions now are good, isn't it inevitable you will? It's emotional for me recounting that. And because to me, it got to a level of cracking open a deeper layer of what happens between human beings, what's true human behavior, and obviously all human behavior is true in a certain sense, and that human beings are capable and they're doing it. But when they're acting out of defenses, when they're acting out of self-protection, out of strategizing, it's a different order of authenticity. What's the core below that? That's what I'm always thirsting for. That's what it gives me such joy when we can reach that place in directing anything. And I think there's so many more opportunities than, people may think when even coming into, my career is basically directing existing franchises, coming into stories that are already kind of, structured and shaped and characters are kind of in place. But I always regard it as an opportunity. Okay, but let's look at this, the unique circumstances of this particular episode, of this particular situation, and what would make me compelled by what's going on. It's not changing anything necessarily, other than the fact that it's deepening. It's not, I don't have to change characters back, situations, but I can go deeper into it, which reminds me of another story, which is when I was an actor, or studying to be an actor. I arrived at, I was an English major as an undergraduate. I got into law school. I didn't know really what I wanted to do. I knew after I got accepted and went through all that mishigas, I realized this is not for me. I'm not going to enroll in that, and I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I gravitated towards taking some acting classes because I did enjoy drama. I was an English major. I liked story. And I felt it would help free me from some of the constrictions of these personas we carry around and these defenses we erect, and the ways in which I felt not fully present in my life. And I thought, well, let me act. Let me try playing with imaginary circumstances. And I loved it. And I did it for about 3 years studying acting. I ultimately found that my talents, I feel, are much better suited to direct because I had a harder time getting out of my own way as an actor. It was kind of hard to have the scrutiny on me at this moment. What am I feeling right now? And a strong critical voice kind of saying, oh, this isn't real, and having to overcome all that. What was interesting, so I realized as a director, I was am better able to get out of my own way. And frankly, I'm a better actor when I'm working with actors who are really talented because I don't feel personally on the line, and I feel more able to access that. So while I did become a director as opposed to an actor, my experience acting was probably the most helpful thing I ever did in preparing me to direct, because I understood how an actor has to think, what would be helpful for an actor to hear, and what would be destructive, what would not assist someone to access their deeper resources. But while I was acting, I had a few teachers. One was a great teacher named Jeff Corey, who was a blacklisted actor who then opened shop in Los Angeles. He taught Jack Nicholson, among others, very talented. But over the summers, since I was on the West Coast, I would take classes from Stella Adler, who would come in the summers and offer her workshops. And Stella was, her most famous pupil is Marlon Brando. She was a superstar among acting teachers. And she left the group theater in the 1930s because of its emphasis on naturalistic acting. Because of its emphasis on always relating any situation to a particular incident in your own life. It didn't invite the imagination as much as she thought. Our imaginations are treasure chests, and we shouldn't restrict ourselves to always having to be natural. And she would say to the actors gathered around, she would say, being natural is important, but it's not everything. And one thing she would do is she'd stand up in front of them. She's a beautiful, statuesque, very imposing woman, and she'd get up there and she'd kind of slouch, and then she'd pretend she's smoking a cigarette, and she'd, and she'd say, "Is this very good? It's natural, isn't it?" she said, being natural is just a start. And it's like sometimes actors will use being natural as an excuse for not diving deeper into what their character's inner life is. And what she said, and this has been a great lesson for me as a director, is she was talking to actors, but it applies to all of us as storytellers. She would tell actors, give your characters as rich an inner life as you possibly can. Make their concerns large. Make their inner issues big. You know, and that goes again to defining story. It's like, what is a human being, a character, really concerned with? You know, it's easy to kind of, find, you can justify an action or a dynamic within a scene in an almost infinite number of ways, but what would be compelling to you? What would be, that's the question I'm asking when I read a script or watch a scene in rehearsal. What would make this compelling to me? Who would these characters, not just who would these characters have to be, what are the issues? What are the issues in their lives that are active within them? What are they trying to get that isn't just as simple as hitting on a woman and getting a date? Why? I mean, it's like, what do they want for their lives? And how does that advance it in some way? Yes, the dialogue can be the same. I mean, an example I cite in the book just came to me was, a mother with a young person, a young man as a son who's kind of back at home and just kind of not doing anything with his life and is sleeping in and making a mess around the house, and she's having to pick up after him all the time. Well, imagine dialogue between those two characters where the mother might choose the subtext, or the intention. I want him to pick, I'm tired of picking up after him, and I want him to, lighten my load and, pull your weight around here. And she could use that as her subtext and say those lines, and that's natural, that's justifiable, that makes sense. But how much would we care about her or her son? Not a great deal, because that's not a very big intention. If you gave her the inner life, the intention of something along the lines of, I brought you into this world. I think this world is in trouble. I'm concerned about this world. Too many people are just looking out for themselves, and we're losing all of our sense of community and helping each other. And it's like, if you don't take responsibility for yourself, if you don't find it if you don't make it a priority not to make others clean up after you, what kind of person are you going to be going in the world? You may prevent others from thriving because of your, shirking your own responsibilities, and you're better than that. Well, you wouldn't have to change a word of dialogue, but if those were the subtexts going on between the two characters, I would personally be a lot more interested in both of them, and I think the audience would as well. And they would have been cued to another story that you, as the director, had a great power to influence.
I wonder if we can just go back to the Homeland
Yeah.
courtroom scene. So I'm fascinated by this, and I'd actually like to go, and now I want to definitely watch this and dissect it. So I understand that the dialogue was not changed?
Not a bit.
Okay, so then you took both actresses.
Oh yeah, let me tell you more about that.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah. It's interesting that I hit upon this new way of conceiving the scene only the night before we were supposed to film it. And we were already halfway through filming the entire courtroom sequence. I should say, in advance of even getting to the courtroom sequence, because I was concerned about maintaining audience interest in this trial when all that was written was a bunch of negative witnesses kind of pointing the finger at Claire Danes, and I was concerned, well, we have to understand that she still wants to win. We have to make the audience not assume she's going to lose from the get-go. So what can I help Claire with in terms of her performance, her intention? Not simply, because for the writers, it's almost as if what they were saying was, she's hearing all these things and she's taking them all in. Oh, I've really been a bad parent. And the reason she can take them in, this was another interesting element of the script. At the beginning of the episode, she's just come out of electroshock therapy because she's had a bipolar episode that led to manic behavior. They gave her electroshock therapy, and now at this trial, she's been essentially dulled in a certain way. She's no longer the driven character that might be so reactive to people saying, you really didn't do very well that time with Franny, the name of the daughter. Whereas without the electroshock therapy, perhaps she would get defensive. They thought this was an opportunity where Carrie could be more receptive and hear it as if, so that she'd be hearing this as if for the first time. Oh, I did do that. So that was what they thought was the story, was constantly hearing, oh yeah, I did that. Oh, I did that. Oh boy, I did that too. Okay, take my child. And I thought that was not very good drama and very good storytelling, and I thought we'd lose the audience. So in advance of finding this new way for the sister to play the part, I had come up with the only thing that I thought could possibly maintain interest, which is that Claire would be hearing all these things, taking them in, but with the conviction that no one could possibly love this child any more than her, and that she's now finally hearing it will ensure that she'll do a better job as a parent. So that would be a way she could, the audience might understand, oh, she still wants to win. But there was no dialogue to support that. So I thought all of that would have to be conveyed by Claire just by the way she was listening. So it was a difficult intention. So I set up a pre-production meeting with Claire Danes, which is not in television, it's a rare thing to do. These actors are, certainly the leads are generally so skilled, and Claire Danes is one of the consummate actresses in the world. I wanted her to have an idea of how I thought she should approach preparing for the part. So we met for coffee during my prep period, and I explained the dilemma, which she fully understood. And I said, so I think what would be great is, as you're hearing this testimony, we want the sense that it's going in, that you're hearing it in a new way because of this alteration of your brain, but that you're also equally convinced that it's going to make you a better parent, not that you should give her up. So she said, okay, I'll do that. And so, but I wanted to acquaint her with this way of playing it, not just spring it on her when we show up to film. But I knew also that to support both Claire and the audience understanding it, I'd have to contextualize what was happening, because all Claire would have to convey any of this would be like looks and facial expressions, and no cross-examination, and no, I even filmed in a moment where she leaned over to her own lawyer, and her lawyer interrupted with a question that showed she was fighting, but I just filmed it in case they saw my point later, but they didn't want to include that. So I had to figure out ways. So other things in the filming I did is like, well, let's give her a notepad, and as she's hearing things, maybe she's hearing that and she writes something down as if that's something she's going to ask her lawyer. But in any case, I prepared Claire for the difficult challenge she faced, still not satisfied that would be enough. And so the night before the sister's testimony is when I had this kind of epiphany of how I thought the scene might really work. And again, I realized that's not something I can spring on the actress. An actress named Amy Hargreaves, an excellent actress who played Maggie, the sister. And she was going to testify the next afternoon. That's when we would film it. So I called her up. And I said, I've just had this new insight into how I think this scene would work, and I'd like to share it with you. And I shared with her this whole new approach to her character. And it was daunting, and it was asking her to go far deeper into herself and to make herself vulnerable in a way that, she probably wasn't even thinking of, because she was in a battle mode. She, as the adversary in this courtroom, she was going to go in and kind of, kick ass and take names, or whatever they say. And so I was saying, no, that's not what this is going to be about. It's going to be about you facing your own sense of deficiency publicly. And she loved it, because she was concerned because she'd have to do some of that work that night. But as any good actor does, they relish an opportunity to go deeper. That's why I think the best actors are in it. And that's why I'm in it. That's why, it's like we want to crack open something deeper within ourselves and get to experience it. Because life has its own complications. There's a lot of things you need to keep defenses in place for. But in the world of the imagination, in plays and drama, it goes to your question about why we go see stories, why we want to see them. We get to see things happen that don't happen so easily in life. And so she did the preparation, and she came in the next day and was brilliant. And I should say that for anybody who looks at the episode, I don't know how much of this would really land. I think people will feel, oh yeah, that made sense, what happened. But what's also interesting to me is about this story is I realize that there's a large section of the fan base of Homeland who really would regard this as kind of not one of their highlight episodes because it doesn't deal with international intrigue or mortal peril or all these exciting things. It's simply a domestic drama. But to me, it was one of, and I've done some episodes that fit that bill. I did one on the 4th season called 13 Hours in Islamabad, which was the overtaking of the American embassy in Pakistan, and it was one of the most exciting shows, I think, of the whole series. That gets a lot of attention. This was just a little custody trial, but I get so much pleasure knowing that the work that went in and the depth that we were able to reach and making a moment real. And that's what I think is the director's job. And all of us together, but the director is the final arbiter. The director is the one who's in charge of assessing moment to moment how the story is being told and when it's at its best form. And so I take a lot of inner satisfaction from that particular sequence.